When you think of healing, what do you think of first? You may think of physical healing after a traumatic accident or a life threatening illness. Maybe you think of emotional healing after the death of a family member or a very good friend. Or maybe you envision emotional healing after a really traumatic and haunting experience. The good news is that Christ can heal any and all of these wounds, but he never heals us without teaching us something about ourselves or more importantly, about himself first. Welcome to Cause of Our Joy with me, Elizabeth. Looking back to when I was still suffering from my cycles, I realized that pain that lasts a long time can leave scars you aren't necessarily aware of. And that is with any type of pain, by the way. It can be physical, emotional, psychological, or even spiritual type of pain. And Christ understands this perfectly because he experienced himself. He has deep scars and wounds from saving us from sin and death and hell ultimately. And actually, in order to save us in the first place, he had to experience the deepest suffering that we can't even imagine, beyond what any mortal human could ever suffer. So, when we are in suffering, we're in the grip of fear, we actually have the perfect person, the perfect example to look to in the moments that we're struggling the most, and that's Christ. And he redeemed our suffering. He made it sanctifying for us, and that in that way he made it beautiful. Now, getting back to your painful cycles, there's always a purpose for your suffering. And God is currently using the pain that you are experiencing to not only deepen your faith in him, but to come to understand his purpose, his created purpose for you. And speaking from experience, my painful cycles and endometriosis diagnosis really scared me. My biggest dream has always been to be a mother, and endometriosis often causes infertility along with a whole host of other issues with your cycles. And as my pain and suffering increased from all of those symptoms, I became more and more concerned about even being able to have children. So I prayed. I prayed really hard and I prayed over a long period of time. Those were during the darkest moments of my symptoms when really life was really hard, and endometriosis and painful cycles are really emotionally taxing. And I would call them my dark nights because it just felt like I wasn't going to be able to be freed from that burden. And I really remember calling out to Christ specifically in those moments when I felt like I physically could not take it anymore, and ask for mercy. I know I didn't deserve it, but I definitely ask for it. And in those moments, I would receive just the smallest bit of consolation, and I knew that He would ultimately protect me. I did have faith in that. And Christ, He heard my prayers. He responded quietly, not just in those little moments of consolation, but He started moving things in my life to get me to where I am today. He also answered my prayer in a way that He knew I would have no doubts that this was Him answering my prayer. At the height of my symptoms, He actually introduced me to a woman who had also battled PMS symptoms, really rough cycles, painful cycles, along with a host of plenty of other symptoms that weren't tied specifically to her cycles. And she had her entire life changed when she began filling her nutrient gaps. So, as I listened to her tell her story, I immediately knew that this was the answer to the prayers that I had been praying for so long, because I had already started doing research, just trying to figure out what would be a more holistic way of approaching my cycles. And this was before I knew anything about health at all. But she wanted to explain to me that our soil and therefore our foods are depleted. And because you are what you eat, 75% of us aren't getting what we need in our food every single day. So when she started helping me fill my nutrient gaps with an epigenetic and bioavailable shake every day, I finally began to experience my body repairing and balancing for the first time. And within the first month, my digestion did a 180 from like age 10 on. I'd had horrible issues with my digestion. It was only getting worse. Did a 180 within a month of filling my nutrient gaps. So I was able to eat things that I hadn't been able to eat in years. I also noticed that I was sleeping better. And then within 3 months, a back injury that I had from childhood also began to repair itself. 6 months in, and I had my first pain free cycle. And when I tell you how life changing that was, not even knowing that my cycle was going to start, it was totally life changing. Then, when I added another shake for hormonal balance, I saw incredible changes in my cycle. No more extra bleeding before or after my cycles, which was a very big thing for me. The length of my cycles finally became consistent, and it also became really easy to identify which phase I was in. At the time, I'd started doing something called NFP, or natural family planning, NAPRO technology. It goes by all of those names. And I could actually see on my chart going from like totally a mess and being really confusing to read, and my instructor not really being able to distinguish what was happening with me, to being perfect, exactly textbook perfect, which was amazing. She had told me at the time that very few women today are having textbook perfect cycles. Along with that, my PMS, especially the moodiness and irritability, emotional instability, whatever have you, they never returned. So now that I had finally filled my nutrient gaps and balanced my hormones, my body finally repaired the way that it needed to. And it's all because Christ intervened and he led me to cellular repair the way that God had created for us, specifically through nutrition, through food. But more importantly, he led me to spiritual healing as I placed more and more of my trust in him. And I'm even more grateful now because now I know that whatever I am facing, whether I am called to suffer in those moments, whether I'm called to receive healing finally from something, or whether it's quick or not, I know that He is going to provide that for me. And since Christ led me down this path, I'm going to invite you to join the journey. I've created a free guide just for you on how to bring Christ into your healing journey so that you can find answers, but ultimately so that you can find peace and trust in Him. And all of that information is linked down for you below. Until next time, Deus Vult.